Hello, Booktube. I've got my first last week in Booktube for you of the new year. Those of you who are new to the channel or who are new to the idea, it's a recurring feature of mine where I look back at some of the videos on Booktube in the last week that I really liked and that I wanted to make sure you saw or at least saw a link to. It's not meant anyway to be comprehensive. I watch a lot of Booktube, and then there's a lot of Booktube that I don't watch, and I'm sure that I missed a lot of great stuff. But I have a little list of things that I wanted to make sure to mention to you. Now, it being the first week of a new year and a new month, it bears repeating what we all already know. There are times when Booktube is an amazing collection of fierce individuals, people who are doing their own thing, and I love that about it. And then there are other times when Booktube is seized by some common impulses and starts to follow a lot of the same trends, and I love that too because everybody takes their individual perspectives on it. This was one of those times. Last week in Booktube was very much characterized by three types of videos. Best and worst reads of 2016. Now, I didn't do one of those because over on my intergalactically famous book blog, Steve Reads, I do the mother of all year-end roundups. Not just on Booktube or on YouTube, but in the publishing world in general, where I assess the best and worst books of the year. I couldn't think of any way to do a YouTube version of that, so I just let it go over there and didn't do any version of it myself. And then another kind of those three, another one of those three is most anticipated books for 2017. A lot of people have done that, and I haven't done it myself. I just keep thinking the list would be too long. I anticipate lots and lots of books for lots and lots of different reasons, so I just haven't done it. But those videos were fascinating to watch. It's always fascinating to see what somebody's really looking forward to. That gives you a window into them that I like. And the third of the three trends that characterized Booktube last week was 2016 retrospectives, and especially 2017 reading and writing goals. Retrospectives, I think, for me, are encapsulated in my Steve Reads Goddard Emerald over on Steve Reads. But in terms of 2017 writing and reading goals, that's something I think I want to make a video about. I found those videos fascinating. And I have some goals of my own and some problems with those goals that maybe you can all help me with. You certainly have helped me with lots of things throughout the year. But those three things characterized 95% of Booktube last week. There were exceptions. There were things that I found that weren't those that were really, really good. For instance, the Bookchemist reviewed Thomas Pynchon's V. Now, if anybody on Booktube, you want anybody on Booktube to talk about Thomas Pynchon, it's him. And V is, it's an odd Thomas Pynchon. Well, they're all odd, but it's he's right when he says at the opening of his video. I think it's at the opening and not at the end. Says that a lot of people call V Pynchon's best book. I don't. I tend to agree with him. The unspoken ethos of a lot of his Pynchon videos is that Pynchon is better the harder he is, except for Inherent Vice. I have no idea why anybody likes that book, but the Bookchemist is fond of Against the Day, which is not only the hardest Pynchon book, but the hardest book, period. and much as I found it, if I find a hardcover of Against the Day at the Brattle in 2017, I am going to reread the book. I've only read it once. I read it when it first came out and was baffled, just completely baffled. But that video is well worth your time, especially if V is on your radar to read. And Books&Bobs reviewed A Darker Shade of Magic, did a really good, fun, inviting job of it. And Max at WellDoneBooks did something where he asked friends of his for book recommendations, one book each, and did a video of Booktube Recommends, where he lays out what the books are and who recommended them. I thought that was fascinating. There were also milestones. Richard at Richard Reads hit 100 subscribers in record time. Cam at Wolfshop Publishing hit 500 subscribers. The Poptimist hit 4,000 and called for a Q&A, that you should all bombard him with questions. That's all wonderful. To know that these and other of the really, really good BookTube channels are getting tons and tons of attention, I say more power to it. Let's keep it going. And then there were deeper things, a handful of deeper, more conceptual videos. This will be a short last week in BookTube because most of it was given over to the top 3 categories. But William at Baldbookgeek did a very interesting video called "Is BookTube Anti-Library?", in which he sings the praises of libraries and points out that sometimes on some book channels there seems to be an anti-library bias. There seems to be the flip side of his video is that there seems to be a mania for new books, getting them in the mail, getting them from publishers, going out and buying stacks of them, and then displaying them and putting them on their shelves, and the unspoken rejoinder being, and then never reading them. I think there's something to that. I think there's some meat to that worry that there's a whole stratum of BookTube channels that have a kind of a magpie quality, where the person is clearly taking in more books than they are going to read, and clearly doing it in large part on impulse, wherever that impulse comes from. Sometimes bad places, sometimes competitive places, sometimes peer pressure places. And that I understand where he's coming from, that can be discouraging to watch in a part of YouTube that is allegedly dedicated to the love of reading. I think I would love to see an antidote to that. I would love to, if somebody would create an event, a hashtag, a tag, a book tag about libraries, maybe even a series of them. I would certainly love to know more about all of your favorite libraries, and I'd be happy to tell you more about the 2 that I tend to frequent. I couldn't help but notice when the book buying tag was going around, the book buying tag had a question about, how often do you use your library? And I couldn't help but notice a lot of people's answers to that question were essentially the same as the one that I gave, which is that I really don't, use my library anywhere near what I used to. And sometimes there was a correlation. I use my library less since I got involved with BookTube. So there's definitely something going on there, and I wonder about it, and I'd love to hear about it. So maybe I'll make a tag. I don't know. Or maybe if there's a library book tag out there already, let me know in the comments, because I would love to do it. I'd love to do them all if there's more than one. And then there's a YouTuber named Bobby Burns. I don't think I've ever mentioned him on this channel before because he's a movie YouTuber. He doesn't really talk about books very often. He's a fantastic movie YouTuber. He's well worth your time to watch. And the reason I'm mentioning him this time is because he actually moved over to a bookish and writing related subject with a video called "How to Escape Writer's Block." He starts off the video by saying that if you have no idea what he's talking about, if you've never had writer's block, you can turn off the video right now. But I didn't. I watched it anyway, even though I tend to think writer's block is mostly affectation. And certainly I sympathize with it when people think they're going through it. I just think... Again, I quote from the classic movie Moonstruck, snap out of it. But that might be easy for me to say. I am an old world, Old Bailey hack, after all. But his video was really, really good, and I say that even though his video leaned very heavily conceptually on a video, earlier video made by Max Landis. Some of you who've watched this channel through 900 videos or whatever it is might recall. I'm not Max Landis' biggest fan, but his videos are very entertaining, they're very energetic, and his video about beating writer's block, flipping the premise, isn't as ironclad, and it isn't as profound as he thinks it is. And some of the claims that he makes about the process of flipping the premise simply are false. It doesn't produce a brand new story. Of course, it doesn't produce a brand new story every time, but that's all right. And because it's interesting to think about anyway. It might be the kind of prompt that a person undergoing writer's block might need. And if Max Landis' video isn't enough, then the video that Bobby Burns makes of that video, the expansion on it, the thoughts about it, will almost certainly be enough. Well worth your time, all the writers on AuthorTube out there, to watch that video, even especially since he might not be on your radar. And then the last thing I want to mention is a channel I mentioned here before. It's Arthur from ChapterSelect. I tell you, just when I think I know how brilliant this kid is, he makes another video that just blows me away. And he did one this week in Booktube called Good Grief, about collective grieving. I thought it was amazingly tactful video. He looks back on 2016 and points out the meme description, dumpster fire. He points out what a rough year it was. He's extremely diplomatic. He mentions mass shootings. He mentions all sorts of tragedies. He doesn't mention the elephant in the room, so to speak. And I've noticed that a few retrospective videos also haven't mentioned Donald Trump, haven't mentioned the fact that the United States elected a fascist as its leader, an ignoramus and a liar and a fascist, someone who people are forgetting, or seem to be forgetting, probably for trauma reasons, but he hasn't actually taken power yet. He will in January, and then will He's not actually mentioned by name in Arthur's video, and I thought that was very tactful. It gave the thing more power because it elevated it. And the thing that is mentioned in his video, to wonderful effect, is C.S. Lewis's book, A Grief Observed, which I strongly recommend. It's a heartbreaking book, written out of heartbreak. Lewis wrote it in the grip of hot grief, not what most writers in the Western canon have done when they write about grief, which is to wait until it cools. Instead, he wrote about it when it was hot. In my experience, the only other people earlier than him who did that with any kind of effectiveness were poets. John Donne, for instance, or Ben Jonson. And never at such projected length. A Grief Observed is not a long book. It's a short book, but Arthur's right. If you've ever experienced end of the world, end of time, I can't survive this grief, you'll be amazed to find there's a book that actually captures what you went through. You would think that it's not. You would think that the most personal experience in the world, the most devastatingly personal experience in the world, couldn't be captured in words by a stranger, but depends on the words, depends on the stranger. And so in addition to recommending the book, I heartily second the recommendation. I also recommend the video. You go and watch it. You'll really like it. And I will remember to put links to all these things down below. And that was last week in Booktube. Just a handful of highlights. So we'll do this again next week. I'm sure I'll have a little more variety, although I'm not decrying the lack of variety in this case. Those top 3 categories at the top of the list made for some fascinating videos. I highly recommend them. They're not cookie cutter. And that's it for now. Let me know in the comments what you saw this week that you think I might have missed. And I'll see you soon, Booktube. Thank you.